A lot of the media is owned by people with special interests. I think a lot of you know why I left NTV, because I refused to agree with the direction editorially that the company was taking. I could not stand and be told that you can't cover this, or you can't interview this person, or you cannot say that. I felt that was where my independence ended, and I could not stand for it. And I was very open about it. I cancelled my column with the Daily Nation, and then I quit NTV because as a journalist, but before that I enjoyed all the freedom that was supposed to, and all the objectivity, it ceased to exist. And I spoke against it internally at the Nation Media Group, but also publicly, because I felt I had a responsibility to speak up for a lot of the other journalists who didn't have the chance, who didn't have the courage, when they knew things were going wrong. When the 8 columnists resigned from the Daily Nation, it was a sign that there was problems in there, that the editorial independence that existed had completely disappeared. And so I'm not saying anything that's new, this is already in the public domain. I told the chief editor at the time, Tom Shindi, that I disagree with how you're running this place. I disagree with the decisions you've taken, and I cannot stand for it anymore. And so I was very happy to leave and not have something else to do than to work for an organization that stifles my independence. Because then we're just a PR outfit for State House, for corporate interest, for whatever. When that independence ceases to exist, then you don't have it. And for me, that was a challenge. That's a challenge still that some of my colleagues in the Kenyan media have, which is you do a story and sometimes they'll say, yeah, Safaricom is our biggest advertiser, we're not going to use that. Or, you know, our chairman is this politician, so we can't use that. And you have to decide between, are you going to post that, are you going to publish that and lose your job, or will you drop it and leave to fight another day? That's not a position any journalist should be in. And too many of my colleagues in the Kenyan media still go through that. And that's the reason why I say some Django. The reason why I respect the BBC and lots of international outlets, I used to, after I stopped writing for the Daily Nation, I started writing for the Washington Post. And they never once told me we can't carry that because somebody might sue us, somebody might have an issue. It was never a problem. And for the BBC, it's never. We have a legal team and an editorial policy team we check with for anything that's likely to be controversial, something or not clear. But there's never at any point the guidance to say we can't use that because it's too sensitive. The BBC will protect you. They will go out of their way to make sure that our journalism remains independent. And that's the one thing that I really wish that African media as a whole, not just in Kenya, would practice more of, to protect independent journalism, to invest more in investigative journalism, and to make sure that they are free of political or corporate influence. And by the way, Leonard Kekai went on to hire me 3 times, because he then moved to NTV, and I went to work at NTV, and then he moved, and I went to work at NTV, and then I left NTV, and went to work for CNBC Africa in Johannesburg, which is a business channel. And then I left that, and Linus hired me again at NTV. I used to call it, don't be offended, it's not blasphemous. I used to call it my second coming at NTV. Only some of you will get that. And so, last year, I finally left NTV, and I think there's a waiting for my 3rd coming. Hopefully it's not too soon. But before that, in June of 2017, I used to do a little show called The Trend. Did anybody watch The Trend? Yes. 2 people, thank you so much. We did it just with the 2 of you. It was just with the 2 of you. I did a little show called The Trend. I worked with some amazing young people, and we covered all sorts of fun topics. I really had fun doing that show. And then I got tired of doing it. So I stopped doing it. And people were like, why would you stop doing The Trend? It's amazing, and you seem to have fun. The reason why I stopped doing The Trend is because I felt I got to a point where I could do it in my sleep. It was not engaging me intellectually anymore. It was something that I could do on autopilot, like instant smile, just add water. And I could bring on Davido, or I don't know, Yemi Alade, or Oliver Mtukudzi, and speak to them and not be actually physically present. Not be mentally in the space. I could be physically there, and I'd like the right places and do the welcome to the show, thank you for watching, blah blah blah, and I was not there. I was like, this is a waste of my time, it's not working for me, so I stopped doing it. And that's the reason why I'm telling you this story, is because there's a point about reinventing yourself. You can never be a one-trick pony, like you only do one thing, that's the thing you're known for, because you're easily replaceable. When I started out, like I told you, I came from a small village. I was like, you know what? I outgrew Siaya, where I came from, so I wanted more. And then I came to the city, and it was really fascinating for me. And then I outgrew Nairobi, and I wanted more. I started to look for other opportunities. And my interest has always been around tech. So In the tech scene, I've covered a lot of tech. I've interviewed a lot of tech entrepreneurs. I've interviewed Google founders, CEO of Microsoft, etc. And every one of them that I did led to the next opportunity. But then when I started speaking at conferences, moderating something, and people will see you on one stage, like, oh, that guy's cool. I'd like for him to come to mine. And so it's self-propagating after a while. Before I was at the BBC, I was already getting a lot of requests to do things, hosting events around the world in Cape Town, in London, in Beijing, in Lagos, and all the likes. So now I have to try and mix between what I do as my job and all of these other opportunities. Like I have to, after this evening I'm giving a webinar at Florida State University. So a webinar is like a seminar, but you don't have to wear pants. Because it's on the interwebs. It's like a seminar on the internet, on the web.
Yeah.
Web seminar, webinar. Do I have to spell out everything for you people? And then later next month, I'm speaking in person. This time it's not a webinar, it's an actual thing. At a conference okay, today's Florida State University. In next month is University of Florida. And then so on and so forth. I'm speaking before that at GSM West Africa in Abidjan. And then it goes on and so on and so forth. And the reason why, again, I said, I will show up on these stages and say, I have a right to be here. And I didn't see myself represented in a lot of these stages. When I go to these conferences, there would be Europeans telling us about Africa. I'm like, what do you know about myself? Well, everything you just said there is complete rubbish, because I have lived this experience as an African, as a lifelong African. Everything you just said is complete rubbish. And it's like, I'll ask the organizers, I want to speak next time. And 9 out of 10 times, he said yes. When I was trying to create a name for myself, I'd be emailing people. I'm like, I know you're hosting this conference in Lusaka in 3 months. I'd love to speak. This is what I speak about, and this is what my areas of expertise are. And usually 9 out of 10 times, they're like, sure. I'm like, okay, so my fee is this, and you need to pay my flight, and you need to put me up in a hotel, because I'm not doing this for work. This is a personal engagement. And again, 9 out of 10 times, they'll say yes. And so that's how it built up over time. And now often I have to say no to some of them, because otherwise I would be constantly on a plane, flying from one place to the other, speaking and not working. So Bahasha FM was an amazing place to work for. I'm using the word work loosely because they didn't actually pay me. It was owned by John Mutuza and he still owes me money. So when I say work, think of it very loosely, because work means a transaction, right? Where you do something and there's pay. In my case, I did something, but there was no pay. However, what I learned from that was much more important about confidence in broadcast and operating in an actual environment. So why did I work at a Kikuyu station? I don't speak Kikuyu. Well, I did not speak Kikuyu at the time. They had news in English, Swahili, and Kikuyu. And so they had Swahili presenters and they had Kikuyu presenters, but didn't have an English presenter. And obviously, because it's a Kikuyu station, in the order of importance, the Kikuyu news was here, and then Swahili, and then English. And because the English was not nearly as important, they could take some rookie from Daystar who knows nothing and pay them nothing to do that English news, right? I was happy to take it because it taught me a lot. Not just, I picked up a lot of Kikuyu that I speak basic Kikuyu now. I think a lot more than most town Kikuyus. You know yourselves. You know those guys who are, yeah, naelewa lakini siwezi ongea. If the shoe fits, lace it up and wear it. So I picked up the language, but two, I learned a lot about just being confident in front of the microphone and writing my own stories. It was a very small news operation, so you had to do everything. You'd have to get your own material, go to the field, come back and script it, cut the audio, and then present it. And so for 2 months, I did that, and then at the end of January 2008, they were like, the company is not doing so well, with the whole post-election violence, there's no business, so we can't afford to keep you. So, deuces. So it's around the same time, finally the mic comes back. So around the same time, the KTN was looking for interns, and I went with my written samples, and I said, yes, I've worked on radio for 2 seconds, so that's all my broadcast experience. Please hire me. Wow. And they hired me as a trivia reporter, so it's really, really exciting times. And I'm really grateful to Farida Karone and Dennis Kekai who took a chance on me all those many years. I know in this city, it's cool to not speak Swahili, because it's seen as a sign of sophistication. I think that's really silly. So you should be ashamed of yourself. That as Africans, we don't speak our African languages. We try to speak English like a white man. I realize the irony of saying that, speaking as I do. However, again, some of you get that tomorrow. this, I don't know where this came from. It's a whole side point. One of my favorite interviews I ever did was with Hugh Masekela. He died a year ago today. And he said, when people come to Africa, they don't come to see us anymore because we all try to be like the white man. So we categorize ourselves by Francophone, so that those who speak French, or Anglophone, or Lusophone, those who speak Portuguese in Africa. And we are so trying to mold ourselves in the image of a white man that people when they come to Africa, they see a cheap imitation of a European, so they come to see the animals, but not us. Because we have tried to run away from everything that represents our culture. For me, one of the things that usually I find odd is this classification between delineation, the way Africans see ourselves. We say, I'm Francophone or I'm Anglophone. And so those of us that speak English, we don't interact with those that speak French. One, because we don't speak the language. But two, and which is important, we categorize ourselves based on who our oppressor was. These are all borders were set up by the colonialists. These are languages that were left to us by colonialists. And now we hang on to them so much because this is how we see ourselves, the way the oppressor wanted us to see ourselves in their image. And yet we're not welcome. I live in the UK partly now. And even if I live there for 100 years, they've never seen me as British. Even when I hold a British passport. I will always have a hyphenated identity, Kenyan British. But ideally, they're like, where are you originally from? That's the question that always pops up. But when we're here, we're happy to try and affiliate with American culture and British culture and European culture. So this is partly a journalism talk and partly a talk on culture and being part of your Africanness and speaking your languages. Because one, they're useful for your careers, and two, it speaks to our identity and how we see ourselves at the heart of how confident you are when you step out in the world. And so, right now, one of the things that I do just to mess with all my colleagues, if you say, they say, Larry Madowo, actually it's Madowo. They're like, Larry Madowo? No, Madowo. I'm like, I'm not going to allow you to disrespect me by saying my name incorrectly. Get it right. We learn to say your names, like Tchaikovsky, and I don't know, all those other crazy British American names. So you're going to learn to say our names properly. And so if I go to anybody's show, they don't pronounce my name, I'm going to have a word with them afterwards. If you don't pronounce it properly. I'm teaching you like a free class of pronouncing African names. Wow. It took me a whole week to gather up the courage to approach Esther Runga and just say hi. Now, some of you were born yesterday and you don't know how much of a big deal Esther Runga was. She was the best thing on television at that time. She was smart, she was beautiful, she was well put together, she was poised. She was everything that anybody wanted to work in journalism aspired for. But then, being in that environment that was surrounded by such excellence and people who were at the top of the game was a huge game changer for me, because it taught me, when I came in on the first day of my trainee reportership, and Farida Karone was like, a guy, we're gonna take you to business. I'm like, but I've never done any business. The only business I had done, I used to, for two seconds, around the post-election violence, just a month before the election and a month after the election, I worked for a small Kikuyu station called Bahasha FM. I did the blogs of 2006, May, and I came from a small village in Siaya. So coming to day stuff. There's somebody from Siaya in the crowd. Hey, Nyakauti, So when I had the days, there was a huge culture shock for me, because everybody seemed to all have it together. They were fancy, they were speaking in a language I didn't understand, they had all these cool phones, and I was like, what? I'm a village boy. I'm completely out of my depth here. And so I went to classes, INS 111, English 111, all those general courses, HPE, is it called that? Yeah. Biology, physical science, did all of those things. Like, why am I doing these things? How are they going to help my life? And it was very strange. I will tell you what, you never know when those courses are going to come in handy. I'm sure the lecturer will appreciate. You never know what stories you're going to be covering, and when you need basic first aid for that instance, or when you need to understand some basic physical science. I ended up a business journalist, and so the economics course, which I failed. That's the truth. We're among friends, right? I can move away. I failed that economics course badly. I think it got like, it's not that bad. And so I think life has a sense of humor because I ended up being a business journalist, and so I ended to understand economics day to day, which is not something I imagined I would do. Anyway, so when I was the first year, and somewhere during, I came in May, did the block semester, and then did the proper August semester, and then that's when I started running out of money. So I remember having a semester, maybe it was that August one, when I didn't have money, so I came to classes but I couldn't do the exams because I didn't have cash to pay for it. So after attending a whole semester of classes, it was very heartbreaking not to be able to do exams, and which means you have to repeat all these courses, and I think you get a Y or a W in your transcript, and those are still in my transcript to date because they never leave. And that's when I started thinking that maybe instead of just coming to class and wasting my time and I'm going to have to do these classes again, I should try and find something. And around that time I started writing for Involvement. I don't know if the Involvement is still around.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic place to begin your journalism career. I have to recommend that. Not just for the communication students, even if you were in whatever department, the School of Law or School of Business, you're studying, I don't know, community development. There's nothing that you want to do that does not include writing, and there's no better place to begin honing those writing skills than at Involvement. And there's so many of us that started out in Involvement that work in great places in the Kenyan media and international media today. So that is really where I began to cut my teeth writing for the Daystar audience in the Involvement. The first time I got a story published, it was on the front page, and I saw by Larry Madowo, and I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. Because let's face it, by design, most of us journalists are narcissists. We're very self-obsessed. Let's not pretend. We like to see our names in the lights. So if you see, I don't know if anybody's had their work done, even if it's on a blog, and then you see it's out there and people start to comment and click on it and tell you about it. It feels very nice. There's like an endorphin that's produced that makes you just really feel good. So when I saw my name, my byline and the Involvement on the front page, it felt right. I was like, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And I haven't stopped since. It's been so long since that first byline, but I think it really inspired me to go and to pursue a career in journalism and to try and do it well. And that's the place where I began. I started out in Athi River, but I did stay in Athi River long and moved to Nairobi, the Nairobi campus, which means I didn't get to do the one thing I really wanted to do was work for Shine. And if you have a chance to get a show, do something on Shine FM, just speak on the mic for 2 seconds, take it. I can't recommend it well enough, because what you don't realize is you're not used to hearing your own voice back. You're not used to hearing your voice translated to a microphone. And until you're comfortable and confident to hear your own voice, then you can really project and you can control it. So if you get a chance to speak on those, on China FM, you get a chance to do something, I would highly recommend that you take it, even if you're not from the communication school. And when I was doing that Involvement work, I figured when I was no longer a student, because I had to drop out and I didn't have money to pay for my school fees, I started writing for, there used to be a website called Siaya.co.ke. It was owned by the same company that published Adam Magazine and True Love and Drum. To a South African company that were trying to do what has become Tuko and Nairobi News and Gafla and all of that, but they were way ahead of their time, so they folded a few years later. But they would pay me. Every time I wrote an article for them, they would pay me. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was something. It was exciting. You know how much they paid me for? I think it was like maybe 300 words or so. They paid me 500 bob. And as a student without money, 500 bob was a whole lot of money, because then I could pay my lunch, I could pay my fare, and I could go to the events where they wanted me to cover. And that was exciting. And so when I had to drop out eventually out of school entirely, and I heard from somebody in campus at the canteen over there, and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, KTN is looking for interns, and they have interviews tomorrow. You should totally go. I was like, but they're looking for interns of 4th years who are looking for an attachment because they've done all their coursework. I'm a first year. I'm still doing general courses. I've not done any actual communication courses. How could I possibly go and what would I get there? But I went anyway. At that point, I had never been inside a TV studio, ever. First year, dropped out. All I've done is some freelance writing stuff, and that's it. So I showed up for this interview, and there I sat across from Linus Kaikai and Farida Karone, who's now CS, and somebody from HR and somebody else. And it was so intimidating because these are people I had only seen on TV, and now I had to speak across from them and try and tell them why they should hire me. Lakini mimi ni nani? Sema kujiamini. So I went in there and I tried to convince them why I was the best thing since sliced bread. And I didn't have anything. I didn't have a single video of me because I'd never been in front of a camera. All I had was my writing samples. And I showed them this is what I can do. And they looked like, okay, all right. And then they called us for a second interview. Then there were a few of us for the second interview. Like, okay, this is progress. And they called us for a third interview. I'm like, come on, it's an internship. Why are we asking us to do so many interviews? And then by the time we got to the third interview, there were maybe 6 of us left. And then they told us to write a TV script, which I had never done before. But I watched television, I knew how TV works. Then they asked us to go and read something on the teleprompter. And that, believe it or not, was the first time ever that I was inside a TV studio for an interview. And so they had a block of text that we were supposed to read as if you're a TV presenter. This was the time when SRO was a really big deal. Lillian Muli and Louis Otieno and Jorge Maura, Beatrice Marshall, these were the big stars at KTN. And I was trying to get into that space. I did today, when my mom died, unfortunately I was 14, I was in Form 1. Everything I needed for the rest of my life she already taught me. About respect for people, about eating my vegetables, about saying thank you and please. I learned that all from her. Everything I've done today, she taught me by the time I was 14. She taught my sister and I. And so confidence, speaking openly, and just not being afraid to speak your mind, all those things I learned from my mother.